I am certain that every one of you without exception knew at least one kid in elementary school who seemed different from the rest. Perhaps they were exceptionally irritating. Maybe it was a child who constantly chewed on pencils and made strange noises. Or perhaps it was someone who was always causing trouble. Their report card filled with notes from teachers written in red pen. The person I want to tell you about wasn't your ordinary weird kid. Dor was different. Yes, Dor. That was his name. It wasn't a nickname, it was right there in the documents, the report card, and on his student ID. I don't quite remember his last name. It was something extremely common. Something like Smith or Jackson. Then again, it's no wonder I forgot his surname. It was rarely used because everyone knew who you meant when someone called out Dor. He was always dressed in a checkered shirt and belted trousers. Everything seemed too big for him. And even as he grew, his clothes always remained overly spacious. His eyes were small and, strangest of all, perfectly round. Kid looked like a puppet from a children's theater. His face was always smeared with some kind of cream or moisturizer because it shone noticeably. And his ears seemed too straight and shallow. He was short, much more so than the other kids in the class, and he wore his blonde hair in a bowl cut. My friends Martin and Luke theorized that he was Swedish or Norwegian because the name had something Scandinavian about it. Besides, he spoke with a strange accent. When he was called on to answer a question or read aloud, he pronounced every word very slowly and precisely, to the point of exaggeration. He would thrust his lower jaw out in a strange way. I remember that particularly. It made him look, to put it respectfully, mentally challenged. But aside from this peculiar way of speaking, nothing else suggested it. Quite the opposite. He got straight A's and, where possible, A+. He became the class nerd, on whose shoulders fell the task of doing other students' homework. He never refused when someone asked for his help. It seemed to me that he didn't even know how to say no. He simply carried out all requests and orders. Even though he operated like a computer, and even in situations where practically the entire class owed him their homework, done with almost inhuman punctuality and neatness, he showed no signs of fatigue. When I think back on him, I basically don't remember Dor showing any emotions. He was kind of empty inside. I don't know how to explain it, but it was something similar to autism. He only talked to you when it was absolutely necessary. Even when I had to work with him on a group project, he spoke very sparingly and only when needed. He did everything emotionlessly and with the diligence of a seasoned accountant. He was never late nor sick. I had the impression that all illnesses, even chickenpox and other common childhood ailments, simply avoided him. In phys ed, despite his unimpressive and stiff posture, he conscientiously participated and always somehow managed to do well in ball games and other disciplines. I also never remember him sweating. While the rest of us shoved our sweaty t-shirts into our bags after class, he would neatly fold his clean, seemingly freshly laundered clothes into a perfect cube. It seemed that given his peculiar manner, he would have attracted the attention of school bullies who wouldn't pass up the chance to pick on such a distinct, eccentric, and obvious target. But his otherness was so unsettlingly different that nothing like that ever happened. Only once in the 5th grade, some new hot-headed student from an older grade accosted him in the hallway. To everyone's surprise, the small boy who looked like a scarecrow with that haircut and loose clothes said something to the burly hooligan that made him jump back and walk away with clear consternation on his face. He never wanted to talk about it afterward and gave up any further attempts to bother Dor. "Maybe he's some kind of robot," Luke joked. "What are you on about?" I replied. "Come on, Dor a robot. Look how he walks," he whispered in my ear as Dor appeared in the hallway. Indeed, he walked stiffly and unnaturally. A robot for sure. One day in the 6th grade, as the school year was ending and everyone was clearly cheered by the approaching summer holidays, Dor came up to me. This surprised me because he had never initiated a conversation with anyone before. His round eyes looked at me like two cameras, closely observing me as if studying some newly discovered species of exotic reptile. "Excuse me," he began, speaking slowly, precisely, and with an accent as usual. "For asking, but I won't be able to be at school tomorrow. I'm going with my parents to my grandparents. Could you bring me your English notebook the day after tomorrow? I will need it to catch up on the classwork." I was slightly surprised by this sudden conversation, but since Dor had never bothered me and had even done my homework for me a few times, I decided to do him a favor and agreed to bring him my notebook the day after tomorrow. "Good, thank you. Sorry for asking you like this, but I have to do my homework," he replied, still staring straight at me. "Here is my address." He handed me a note and walked away. When he said he had to do his homework, I heard something strange in his voice, as if he hadn't said it of his own volition. It was like he was behaving like someone who was only pretending to go to school. As I walked home that day, I took out the note with the address he had given me and looked at it again. On it, written in the strangest handwriting I had ever seen, not at all like the one Dor used in school and for homework, was an address I had never heard of. Below this address was a small hand-drawn map. Thanks to it, I understood where his house was. I stared at this map for a long time because, even though it was clearly drawn by a child, it looked very orderly, almost topographical. Just as he had said, he wasn't at school the next day, Thursday, which all the teachers clearly noticed. The whole class was also full of rumors, though I calmed everyone down by saying that such a day had to come eventually. Even a nerd such as him had to miss school at least once. When Friday came, Dor was still absent, even though he had said he would only be gone on Thursday. I decided to go to the address he had provided and deliver my notebook to him as I had promised. For a few moments I wandered around, wondering how it was possible that he could live in such a place. The area was devoid of any houses or apartment blocks. Only here and there were factories and some smaller auto repair shops and workshops. Then I found myself opposite something that looked like an unfinished house. A square block of concrete with a strange chimney sticking out of the side. It looked like a crude drawing of a house made by a preschooler, replicated in reality. Even the windows were large and square, and the door was flat without any plaque or number, and had a round doorknob. I knocked uncertainly, wondering if his parents were just doing some renovations. After a moment, Dor himself opened the door. He looked different, which threw me off balance. I must have looked clearly worried because the boy looked at me rather peculiarly. "Glad you made it," he said. "I couldn't be at school today. My parents want me to stay home. I am sick." His face was all flushed and covered in pimples. His lips were clearly dry and cracked. I noticed with considerable unease that his legs were strangely bent, as if his knees weren't working properly. "Do you have the notebook?" he asked coldly. "Yes, of course," I replied uncertainly and handed it to him. "Thank you. I will return it when—" He interrupted himself abruptly. As he reached for it, a sound came from behind his back, something between a knocking and a scraping. I had never heard anything like it before. It was quiet, and I probably wouldn't have paid much attention to it if it weren't for Dor's reaction. He, as if frightened, and this was the first time I had seen such extreme emotion in him, turned around suddenly and stared into the depths of the house. I peeked a little behind him and noticed that the whole house was full of some strange objects. Some were small, others large. Some resembled chairs in shape, others tables. They were all smooth, made of some kind of plastic and completely black. Some modern decor, I thought. Why can't I see his parents? Then I remembered them. My mom, once returning from a parent-teacher conference, told me about them after scolding me for my poor math grades. They were like him. They looked strange, spoke with a funny accent, and dressed as if they had never seen other people. At that moment, as if reacting to my thoughts, his dad emerged from behind the door. He was terribly tall, perhaps even 2 meters, and he looked at me like I was an intruder. His face bore such a tense and hateful grimace, and it's hard for me to this day to believe an ordinary person could make such a grotesque and exaggerated expression. When he noticed my consternation in a split second, he assumed a gentle expression, as if someone had switched a setting. He behaved mechanically like a robot. As I stood there embarrassed, not knowing what to say, he said, "You are Dora's friend from school, yes?" He spoke with the same strange tone and accent as Dora, though much more naturally and less stiffly. "Nice to see you." Yes," I replied, confused. That strange sound coming from inside was getting louder. Dora's father glanced behind himself for a moment and then turned his round eyes back to mine. "Dora is very sick, he must stay in bed. We would invite you in, but you might catch it." The way he pronounced "catch it" was so abnormal that I almost fainted from fear. It's hard to describe. It was as if his vocal cords instantly dropped several tones lower and emitted a thick, low gurgle that barely imitated human speech. I just nodded my head and said goodbye hurriedly. I don't even remember exactly what I said because the stress made me focus only on getting home quickly. When I got back, I told my mom I had been at Dora's to give him my notebook. "Did you see his father?" she asked inquisitively. "Yes, why?" "Terribly tall guy, right?" she asked jokingly. "Come on," I replied. "He's a weirdo." "Why? You know you shouldn't judge people by their looks." "That's not it," I said, still slightly shaken. "Son, did something happen? You're pale." "Nothing much, it's just, he talks weird, he scared me a bit." "Oh, they all have some strange accent," she replied. "Don't be so nervous. You'll meet even stranger people in your life." That evening, I lay in bed restless. I pondered all of this, and the sight of the sick Dora and his terrifying father gave me strange nightmares. I dreamed of the inside of their house, raw and full of those strange, black, plastic-like blocky furniture. I saw myself entering, crossing the entire living room, and reaching some doors. Behind them, I saw stairs leading down to a basement, and then the dream would cut off. Dora disappeared along with my notebook. He wasn't at school even during the end-of-year ceremony. From what parents, teachers, and students gossiped about, I gathered that he had moved away suddenly. His parents didn't even contact the principal. It was as if they had simply evaporated. All of this unsettled me, and even though the summer holidays were starting and I had passed all my subjects, including the math I hated, I felt strangely uneasy. Several years passed and I slowly forgot about Dora and his strange family. I finished high school and was starting university when Martin, an old good friend from school with whom I kept in touch, reminded me of that eccentric boy. "Remember that freak?" he asked me one day when we met in town. "Oh God," I laughed. "Of course I do. Remember me telling you about what his house looks like? Crazy." Maybe he and his folks were some kind of aliens. On one hand, I laughed at the thought, imagining Dora's father taking off his human disguise and revealing his true form. But after a moment, I remembered the address of his house. "Maybe we should go there," I suggested. "We won't go in, but I just want you to see this strange house of his. Sure, Martin replied. I've got plenty of time before my classes. We headed to that street with determined steps, and even though I had forgotten its name, I remembered exactly how to get there. I saw the familiar area full of factories and workshops again, and then that bizarre house. It looked abandoned and neglected. The door stood open, only sealed with the tape that someone had already torn off. All around where bushes and small trees had once grown, there was only barren earth and piles of rubble. No wonder it's standing empty, Martin said after a moment of silence. Who would want to live in something like that? Slowly we approached the entrance. I picked up a piece of the torn tape. It was yellow and strangely flexible. I had never seen anything like it before or since. The living room was completely empty and raw. The bare concrete walls gave the place a menacing look. I felt like Martin and I had found ourselves in a truly dangerous place. Let's get out of here, I whispered. Someone might catch us. Who's going to catch us? Martin replied loudly. Calm down, it's an abandoned ruin. We can explore a bit, right? Then when Martin turned his gaze to the door on the other side of the room, my heart pounded with horror. There must be a basement there, I groaned. What? Martin asked. How do you know? I don't know, but I don't want to go in there. I lied. I didn't tell him about that dream. I didn't want him to think I'd lost my mind. As I stood rooted to the spot in fear, he moved forward and opened the door, which crashed to the ground with a terrible bang. Damn it, he shouted. They weren't even attached. I'm telling you, let's get out of here, I begged. Calm down, I want to see what's down there. No one's been here for ages. Maybe we'll find some old hobo down there. He laughed, then descended the stairs into the darkness. Do you see anything? I asked. Nothing, find the light switch. After fumbling along the wall for a moment, I finally found the switch, and the entire basement was illuminated by a pale, cold light. Martin screamed, and I felt like I was losing my senses. Before our eyes were 3 naked figures lying on the floor, 2 larger ones and 1 small one. They weren't human bodies, but incredibly realistic figures made of some plastic-like material. I rubbed my eyes in amazement while Martin panted hysterically. What the hell is that? He groaned. Mannequins or what? It's them, I replied in disbelief. It's Dor and his parents. They had no genitals. They were large, rigid, genderless dolls. Their faces were smeared with a thick reddish-orange paint. In the corner of the basement lay 3 sets of clothes, neatly folded into squares. I recognized one set of clothes immediately, the checkered shirt and belted trousers. Next to them lay my notebook, untouched for 12 years and covered in a thick layer of dust. We both ran out of there and got outside. We ran for a long time until we found ourselves on the main street. My head was spinning. I didn't know what to do. What was that? A breathless Martin asked. I have no idea, I replied, still stunned. This is insanity. No one will believe us. Why would they leave mannequins there? One screwed up family, man. A few days passed, during which we tried to explain it all to ourselves somehow. They were just ordinary mannequins. Maybe Dor's father was some kind of artist and that was his project or something. And my notebook. They probably moved in a hurry and left it there along with that bizarre art installation. I know it all sounds stupid, but we preferred to believe in stupidities rather than confront again what we had seen in that basement. It all seemed so sinister, so alien. Yes, they were mannequins and nothing more, we concluded. A month after that event at night, as I lay in bed, a strange feeling took hold of my body, a feeling that someone was watching me. Slowly, I walked to the window and after drawing the curtains, I saw Dor. He was an adult now. I recognized him by his haircut, his face, and my notebook. which he clutched tightly in his right hand. He looked at me and I looked at him as if in a trance. He stood in front of my house and seemed to be trying to say something. He had the same hateful grimace on his face as his father had when he suddenly emerged from behind the door. I heard that sound again, something between a knocking and a scraping. Door took a step forward towards the window, then a second, a third. He slowly approached me and I stood motionless, paralyzed with panic. I wake up sweating. It was just a nightmare, a stupid, damn nightmare. I felt relieved. I took a shower, ate breakfast, and sat down at the computer. I was about to start writing another page of my bachelor's thesis when I noticed something outside the window. A letter was sticking out of the mailbox. I got up from the computer and took it out of the box. Thinking the book I had ordered from abroad had finally arrived, I opened it without hesitation. The contents of the old yellow envelope, which had no postage stamp or address, were not a book. It was my notebook. Several months have passed and I'm practically an emotional wreck. I didn't go to any psychiatrist. I'm afraid they'd lock me up in a mental hospital straight away. What would I even tell them? That I'm being haunted by some supernatural madman, some alien demon, God knows what. As I lingered in this stupor, one day I quite accidentally bumped into the burly guy who had accosted Dor at school that day, and walked away terrified after he said something to him. Now he was an adult, and I recognized him by the scar he had on his arm. I thought to myself that I might as well talk to him if only for my own peace of mind. He recognized me, even though we had never been friends back at school. He knew I wanted to ask him about what he had heard from Dor, that demon back then. With fear clearly etched on his face, he answered me. Dor gave me my full name, my address, the date I moved in, my mom's name, my dad's, my sister's. He knew my phone number, my dog's name, my email password, everything. He knew everything, and as he was talking to me, his voice was so, I don't know how to describe it, as if he had stopped being a child, as if he had suddenly changed. I watched him all tense, but Dor was not a human. My worst nightmares had come true. He was something that was only pretending to be him, his parents too. They weren't human beings. And one more thing, he added. When he finished listing it all off, he told me that if I ever lay a hand on him, he would change into the most terrifying thing I would ever see. As he said it, please believe me, I'm telling the truth. His eyes, he began to gasp, completely overcome with panic. His eyes, he continued with difficulty. They pierced right through me. I know for a fact, as I'm certain in my belief, that Dor is out there somewhere,